If the midterm elections go badly for the Democrats, how does Obama define the rest of his presidency? Welcome to Agenda with George Friedman. George, unless something very surprising happens at these elections, then Obama will be painted into a corner. What are his options for the rest of his presidency?
The central problem is that he will no longer be able to move any domestic agenda unilaterally. He had a great deal of difficulty of doing it before. Now it becomes almost impossible. Therefore, the only areas in which he's free to act is going to be in foreign policy. That's the one place where Congress really doesn't control and the president does control. And that's the place where, over the next year or so, he's going to have to make his move. Remember, the Iowa caucuses are 15 months from now. And in those 15 months, he has got to reestablish his presidency. He's got to demonstrate either his own initiatives or that it's all the Republicans' fault. The latter may be a little difficult. And so we should expect him, like many presidents, to turn his attention to the place where he has power, and that's overseas.
Now, very shortly after the results are announced, he's heading off to India and then on an Asian tour. Will he start to redefine his presidency and set a new agenda then?
Well, I mean, first he has to set an agenda and then reshape it. India plays a role in American foreign policy, obviously, not as much as its size or its economy might dictate. For example, India has influence in Afghanistan, and is one of the reasons the Pakistanis are extremely concerned about what happens in Afghanistan. They feel the Indians are there. The Indians are concerned of increasing American support for the Pakistanis. There's a complex three-way relationship. So to the extent that Afghanistan is important to the United States, India is as well. But of course, it's of some importance as an international partner economically. But as to what the agenda is that he's going to shape, I think that's not yet known, and probably he doesn't know it either.
What new initiatives could he take that might convince Americans that he should have a second term?
There are any number where he can do things where the results can be fairly negative. That is, if he leans on Israel, for example, if he forces a confrontation with Russia. He needs something that there's a general consensus in the United States is a problem. And he needs to act decisively to demonstrate that he can act decisively. And that brings us to Iran. Iran is the problem that has not yet been solved. It is something that there is general consensus in the United States is an issue, although there is no consensus as to what the solution is. This is a place for him to exercise leadership should he choose to.
So then what are the options?
Well, there are three options. One is negotiations, one is a strike, and the other is to continue doing what he's doing. That essentially results in the ongoing problem. The strike is a more complex issue because we have to remember that the fundamental problem of Iran is not its nuclear weapons, although that's what everybody's focused on. The fundamental issue of Iran is that, absent the United States, it is the largest conventional military power in the Persian Gulf. Whether it has a nuclear weapon or it doesn't have a nuclear weapon, whether that nuclear weapon is destroyed, so long as it remains a conventional power, then the American withdrawal from Iraq becomes increasingly difficult. First, because of the influence the Iranians will have in Iraq, and secondly, because it can destabilize the Arabian Peninsula, given that the Iranian army would be close to the Saudi oil fields. So the issue is not a strike against nuclear weapons or not. That achieves very little beyond the nuclear weapons. The issue is, what is the general relationship of the United States to Iran? And there the answer is a war that is designed to neutralize all of Iran's military power, or some sort of negotiated understanding with Iran that makes that unnecessary.
Well, the first is a very high-risk strategy.
Well, one might argue that they're all high-risk options. There are no low-risk options. If the United States attempts to neutralize Iran through an air war, that war can fail, and Iran has options in return, ranging from destabilizing Iraq to using Hezbollah to blocking the Straits of Hormuz. On the other hand, if the United States simply leaves Iraq, leaving Iran as the dominant military force, that poses tremendous regional threats to countries like Saudi Arabia, who far more than Israel is concerned about Iranian power. And if the United States simply does nothing but remains in this holding pattern, that raises the threat of Iran actually becoming a nuclear power and what that means. So with Iran, you have a situation, there are no low-risk choices. You have to select which risk is the most palatable. And ultimately and interestingly, because it is such a risky proposition, it is a place that both has to be addressed and where the president can establish his authority. And one must also remember that in the United States, when there's a foreign policy crisis, the country always rallies to the president.
But aren't American forces fully stretched in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Korea? In fact, could they really mount another war?
War against Iran would not be a land war. There's no possible way the United States can invade and occupy Iran. It's a country of 70 million, it's mountainous, and so on. If there were a war, it would be a war that would be an air war and to some extent a naval war, designed to destroy the Iranian Navy so it can't mine the Straits of Hormuz, designed to attack the nuclear facilities, but ultimately to damage and cause attrition to Iran's military forces on the ground, particularly its armor and artillery. That's certainly within the reach of the United States because it requires only air power, and the United States has plenty of that. The issue, of course, is whether it'll work. Air power advocates throughout history have argued that they can achieve political ends simply through air power. They've sometimes been right, but mostly they've been wrong. And wrong in this case, that is, not being able to achieve these ends, would leave the United States in a very difficult position.
George, we'll have to leave it there. George Friedman, and that's Agenda for this week. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.